59 minutes left apparently of the internal storage. So I came up here, I was thinking about telling Myra the rest of the story I meant to tell her this morning. I didn't mean to digress and never return from Malawi. But so let's go back. And the reason that I flew. Hello, Myra. I'm back in my. I'm in the place where I don't know who I talk to from here. Anybody, I guess. But I'm talking to you now. What made me leery of travelling of going to see Africa with relatives was it was so different to going to see Africa with. I imagined when I looked in Africa on a shoestring and stuff, it was a completely different exercise. And the trip I'd made before that trip was the weekend of the Pan Am. Is it 103? There was a bomb apparently on board, and it crashed over a Scottish town and killed a lot of people, killed everyone in the plane and a lot of people in the town. And that news broke just as we arrived in Plettenberg Bay, and it was a kind of family reunion. And the whole atmosphere was weird. And at that time there was Tracy Chapman in the charts, and I was into Tracy Chapman and Suzanne Vega, and I was trying to cook, God knows why, I was trying to cook vegetarian food, and I was trying to be a vegetarian. I guess because I fancied Catherine, I was chasing Catherine, I wasn't going out with her. I met Catherine ages ago. Ages before that, I met her somewhere at a party of Simon's, and I thought, wow! But so I don't know why I was into that shit, but I was working for IBM, and that trip we went there, and I think we landed at Johannesburg, and I stayed with my cousins, the Grants in Johannesburg. Helen and her, I can't remember many more of the kids. Helen and her sister and her brother. Oh my goodness, I can't even remember. George and Grace Grant are their parents. They lived in Johannesburg. Maybe they still do. And Helen was a bit older than me, I think, or my age. She probably still lives in Johannesburg. And what did we do? We hired a car and drove down to Plettenberg Bay. I gave Helen and I think a friend of hers a lift to George or something. How did that work? Anyway, it seemed to involve trips along the coast in the car. It was all hire car for crapping around. Little Golf, 1.1 litre Golf, VW Golf. South African made, I think. And drove from Johannesburg to Plettenberg Bay. Or I think it was Johannesburg to George. So that was that holiday. And then the next time I went after Catherine and I got together. But it took me several shots to get it, to learn a bit about Africa. I never got onto the kind of tourist trail of going around those from one tourist hostel to another, though. I never got onto that. I never was really that interested in it. So in Malawi I met these two Danish girls, Christina and Meta, and they really wanted to go and climb Mount Mulanje, which is this sort of dormant or extinct volcano in Malawi. I think it's the highest mountain in Malawi. And the crater is all wooded with pine forest and blueberries and stuff because it's quite cold up there. I didn't have a blanket. All I had was did I have a blanket at all? I don't know. I can't have. I won't tell you why or how I remember. I don't think I did. Because I froze the night we spent up at the top in this cabin. And so they wanted a kind of lift. So after messing around with the Israelis and at Monkey Bay, I went with them to Mulanje. We saw this amazing moon rising, and we did. None of us knew what it was. The moon was rising. It was huge. We thought it was an alien spaceship for a minute. It took quite a while to work out that it was the moon. It was so big and red, and it came up over the horizon. My God, really wonderful little drive that, wasn't it? So I'm not talking. I'm talking to them now. I keep hoping that I've bumped into them, but I don't know where they are. Their chair must be somewhere. God knows where. I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. I have to ask my mother. She won't talk to me. So I went back, and then the Israelis were going to come to Zimbabwe, but they couldn't get there. They got locked at the airport, and they needed a reference, and I wanted my uncle to help, and I think he'd been, God knows what had happened. Fucking. Now what's that? What's it beep for? I've got to look. Hang on. No, it's come up with the fucking autofocus crap keeps turning on, but it's no goddamn use to me, is it? What do I do? How stupid is this? What a piece of junk. I've lost the track. Why did they do that? The Israelis were ex-Israeli service guys, boys and girls. They were nice people, but they had some horrible fucking stories to tell. And they got stuck. They weren't allowed into Zimbabwe without some kind of reference or some kind of guarantee or something. And I thought my uncle would be able to help, and I asked him, and he said no, he wasn't going to help. So I did several trips to and from the airport trying to help them get in. Now it's beeped again. What the fuck is that for? It says 9:13. I don't think I touched anything. Anyway, I reckon George H.W. fucking Bush went and got involved at some point. What's the matter, George? That beep happens whenever I get sniped, does it? You're learning about quantum mechanics. think it's trying to face ID something or something. You want a face ID? What the fuck it is? There's the plant. It's a lovely rock, isn't it? So this was all after that war, you see. And one of the main effects of that war was that people with farms, just people with big tobacco farms and all sorts of farms, just gave them away to save their lives. They went down the so-called chicken run. It was just enough money in their pockets to start a new life in South Africa, and that was usually just a few thousand dollars for big farms that they sold. And my dad's cousins, the Purdens, Chris and Jenny Purden and their family, ended up in New Zealand. Never saw them again. Heard from them at some point that they had a cow, apparently. I don't know if that was me. Fucking crap. I loved their place. They had a swimming pool and they had a kind of bar. There was such a big farm. I don't know, there was some sort of, it was almost like a military base more than a farm. There was something about it that was not quite a family arrangement. I can't remember. I can't quite put my finger on it. But the thing is, the tobacco industry was, the tobacco, you look at the tobacco sales figures, they went straight back up after about 1982, 1983, tobacco production was everything it was before. So what the fuck was going on? My uncle should know because he was deputy director of this commercial farmers union. So that didn't really work out, but I did see a bit of Rhodesia. And I can't remember whether it was on that trip where I couldn't get the Israelis in. It probably was. And I'm not sure whether it was before or after I went to Malawi. But at some point I walked up the road just to get out of out of Venona. It's a kind of, it's not my kind of place. So I just walked down the road. I could probably find it on Google Maps if I looked hard enough. If I knew where One Star Turn is, I could probably show you the road I walked down. And there was a village of, you'd call it an African village. I don't think there were any white people living there. It was almost traditional farmland and stuff. And I spent a wonderful hour or two chatting to these three girls under a tree, eating fruit and talking, and they kind of flirting with me and stuff. And they got my phone number, because the only phone I could give was my uncle's, right? So I go back to the house. A couple of days later, then one of them phones the house, and my aunt answers it. And second surprise phone call from one of the friends. First was the police. The second was one of these girls, and she wasn't very nice about them. But they were nice people. They weren't bad. She was sort of, they'll fuck you to death. I don't know what she wanted to say, but she didn't say it. they'll fuck you and steal your money and give you AIDS, and I don't know what else she was going to worry about. None of that was going to happen. So the third time was better. I advised my cousins in advance that I was going to come. This was in 1992. And I set up a project, and the Commercial Farmers Union had a special eco, this was after I'd been to Schumacher College. The Commercial Farmers Union had set up an eco farm stays system, and they were the farms were going to do a organized, graded, quality controlled tourism operation to do kind of agro-eco-tourism. And I said, yes, we can do that, we can get into it. And I talked to my parents, and we thought about what you needed to set up as a travel agency or a tour operator. And I looked into all that IATA shit. You have to have special IATA insurance so that if the airline or whatever it has, all that crap. We didn't have any capital, apparently. And I went back, and that was a bit better. I think I went to see these farms, and the people just weren't really interested in talking to me. They weren't, I can't remember if I saw them. I went on my own or with Jebs, or I tried to make appointments to visit them and take photos, I thought. And anyway, it was clear it wasn't going to happen. So I went and spent a week on my own at Kariba, and that was fantastic. And I didn't have a car. Usually when we went to Kariba with the cousins, we went in one of their cars. Jebs had about 4 cars, I think. He had a beach buggy, a VW beach buggy, which is kind of like a seriously chopped VW. And he had a Peugeot 205 or something, a Peugeot station wagon, old one. And he kept these things in perfect condition. He had a Volvo as well, and something else, I think. I think Eve had this baby blue something or other. I can't remember what that was. Another Peugeot, maybe. We used to go in one of their cars and go around, and he had a speedboat on the lake. And we'd go out on the lake and thump around. It was good, it was great. I saw things that we would never have seen otherwise. Old encampment areas where there had been military bases during the terrorist war, stuff like that. Abandoned, burnt out personnel carriers and things. And I spent a week there fishing, and I'd borrowed my uncle's tiger fish. They were spinners, I think. All sorts of different ways of luring fish onto a hook, and flies, trout flies, spinners, bass plugs, and I'm pretty sure these were spinners. He'd lent me one of his spinners, and I somehow got it hooked up on it. And I had this wonderful adventure with a lone buffalo, this old buffalo. And when they're old, they've had lots of fights, or they've been, I don't know what makes holes in their ears, but their ears are all raggedy and long and torn. And they live on their own. Usually buffaloes live in a herd. Somebody told me that the ones that live on their own are the dangerous ones. Is the herd just follow the herd, and all you have to do is, they don't kind of attack, but the lone ones are reduced to defending themselves. And this guy came down, and he caught me on a peninsula. I couldn't get off. I was fucking trying to, and I got this fucking plug caught under the water somewhere. I was going to have to wade into the water to try and catch it. I was all in a mess. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I spent hours out there. This fucking buffalo pinned me onto this little peninsula. I couldn't get off. Eventually I ran off, but I left the flipping rod and everything on there. Waited till he went away and then went back to fetch them. But I liked it. At night I was making a fire and you could see all these eyes looking at you. I didn't know what they were. The eyes of creatures looking at the fire. And the really exciting thing was when I heard this cough behind me, this woof. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just a buck or some animal making a noise that they make an alarm. I swear I jumped out of my skin. The next thing I knew, I was sort of, looked to me like 6 feet in front of where I'd been standing before and facing the other way, thinking, what the fuck was that? So I made this story about it. For it sounds like fucking Donald Trump heard about it. Anyway, now I'm pretty damn sure that special forces have used witchcraft. I'm absolutely certain. My uncle used to tell me stories about Salu scouts, but he never said anything about witchcraft. But just the way he described how they operated, I thought, it sounds like witchcraft to me. And then at the end of it, they came along and I made them kariba pudding. To make kariba pudding, you take a small tin of, about that tall tin of Nestle condensed milk. You don't make any holes in it, that's important. You put it in a pot of water, right up to until it's almost, I think it floats, I'm not sure. Or cover it with water and boil it for hours and hours and hours. I think you need to boil it for about 4 hours, very slowly. You mustn't let it dry out because then it overheats and the can explodes. You get a terrible mess. But at the end of it, you get what they call in Argentina and South America, and probably here as well, dulce de leche, sweet, milk sweet. But it's really just, it's toffee. It's kind of milky toffee, but it's the texture of kind of jam or something. You can texture of thick. No, not thick jam, it's the texture of, it's very hard to describe the texture. It's like a very, very thick condensed syrup, but it doesn't do that stringy stuff. It just spreads and folds. And usually just eat it with a teaspoon. You open the can, because the condensed milk goes brown, because it's kind of light chocolatey brown. It's really nice. It seems to me to taste much better when you make it yourself on a fire, keeping the fire going for 4 hours for your cousins than it tastes when you just buy it in the shop by the time. I don't know what they buy. And then we went round on their boat and took action shots. Which consisted of my uncle trying to get me into situations that would frighten me with wild animals. The elephants flapping their ears at me and stuff. It was great fun. And it was on that trip that I took a whole recording of, I recorded hours. I thought they'd like to hear English radio, and I think it was before internet radio. So I made a cassette tape just recording, I think it was Jackie Bramble's yakking away and all these songs playing. One of them was The Days of Pearly Spencer. And Mark Armand sang it. The original was really good though. He was pretty close to the original. What a song. So God knows what I started by doing all that. You tell me, George W. Bush, did your daddy tell you? I spent hours trying to mail that lawyer. She first said, yeah, it's Taylor at hamparianlawfirm.com. And I said, Taylor like Taylor Swift? She said, yes. So the second time, so that email bounces. So I phone her up again. I said, did you say you're Taylor? No, she's Kayla. And then I caught the K. And I said, Kilo Alpha Yankee Lima Oscar Romeo. And she said, yes. I said, okay, I'll try that. So I dialed Kayla. No. That bounces as well. So I phone a third time. And she says, no, I'm Kayla. Kayla. Oh, okay, you're Kayla. Great. Have a good one, she says. So I try again, and this time I didn't see a bounce message. So maybe I managed to send them all I was trying to do was to send them a link to one fucking video and ask them to, contact me. Are they interested in that case? But I mean, look at that fucking case. It's beyond personal injury anyway, because the guy made an out-of-court settlement with McDonald's and the money was laundered. The money was stolen and passed on to ICE. He said, what a mess. That's not really personal injury, so they can say, oh, we're not anything to do with that. We're not interested in that shit. But it took hours and hours to send that email. Hours. What the fuck is the matter? Well, we know what the matter is. I'm sorry, I'm not talking to you. Not talking to you, Myra. I'm just moaning now. This is no fun. Methuselah National Park is well worth a visit. Well, I don't know now. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what's happening. But it is a great place. I'll think of another story. Better stop the video. Nice talking to you. This is good for me.